This is an auction that's a little bit different for us to cover, but I think it's a fascinating one. It's the collection of this gentleman here, George Schiller. And George Schiller has been a rare book dealer in New York for many, many years, more than a half a century. He's getting pretty old now. And he's most well known, those of you that are book nuts, he was most well known for the promotion of Maurice Sendak's work, Where the Wild Things Are, and those books, children's books. He was very well known in the children's book area. But personally, he had an interest in collecting historic memorabilia of China, and in particular, objects connected to the communist revolution that began in 1949, in the history of China and how it got to that point. And then the objects that came as a result of the revolution, the propaganda posters, porcelains, statues, all kinds of things. It's amazing, including musical instruments. It's amazing the things that were produced during Mao Zedong's time to keep the popularity alive of the Communist Party, to push the party forward, and so forth. And whether we in the West agree with it or not, obviously, we live in America here. It's a democratic society. In England, it's a Europe is democratic. Most of the many countries around the world are democratic, but there are a lot of communist parties around these days. There's even strangely a growing interest in some sectors of it here in the United States. But it's an interesting part of China's history because it's important to realize why communism came about. In China, and a large part of it was due to the West. Right? And I know people hate to hear that, but the collapse of China due to the Opium Wars and foreign interference that caused the Qing dynasty to end in 1912 led to basically the desperation economically. When you have economically desperate people, you can get communism, as we've seen in many other countries. And it happened in China. And by 1921, the Communist Party was formed. Within 10 years of the collapse of the Qing Empire, the Communist Party was formed in China. And Mao Zedong was an important part of that from its earliest times. He was a student. He worked as a librarian. He was taken under the wing of a lot of very influential people. He became interested in the writings of Karl Marx and so forth. And the rest, of course, is history. By 1949, he became the head of the Red Army in 1921, I believe it was, or 1931, 1921. And then he was made the head of the Communist Party in 1943 in China, and so forth. And a few years later, they had the revolution and everything that came with it. And once the revolution was over, promotional materials and propaganda posters and sculptures and porcelains began to emerge into the market to keep the movement alive through some pretty horrifying times, including the Great Leap Forward, and when they had mass famine and all kinds of problems in China. Today, China is a very different thing. Today, China has a relatively booming economy. 600 million people have come out of poverty in that country, despite the government and so forth. Anyway, this but largely due to capitalism. They sort of as we all know, China has a communist government but a capitalist economy. That's sort of what they developed, this strange hybrid. But at any rate, this is an auction of those objects. This is an auction of those objects. And it's a rather amazing collection. There's almost 400 lots in here, 370 lots or so, of everything from books to porcelain to ceramics. And I'm going to go through them and keep in mind that the Russian Revolution material from the 1919, 1918 is now highly collected. This is the thing you want to keep in mind. So if you have an interest in ever owning any of this stuff, I would suggest you probably buy some, because as you know, the Russian Revolution material, the art that was done and so forth today is highly collected. Because it's history. It's history. You don't have to agree with the politics, but it is history. And it's the history of the world that you live in. And famously, Jordan Peterson, the psychologist, is a big collector of Russian memorabilia from the revolution, as are many other people. And I think this is going to be the next group of things right now that are sort of don't get an enormous amount of attention, because Mao Zedong has only been dead. Well, he's been dead about 50 years, I guess, at this point, almost 50 years. But this is the next area of collecting that I'm sure is going to become a thing, as they say, for the history. This is not voting in support of politically. This isn't a political statement of owning this stuff. It's a historic statement. just like we own history from Europe's past and other places. It's all part of that history, and it's rather interesting. And there's some absolutely terrific looking things in here. And I'm just going to go through it sort of quickly. I'm going to first get into the books. This is, for example, the quotations of Chairman Mao, the first People's Liberation Army edition that was published in 1964. It's a pretty rare book. It's a pretty rare book, and it's estimated at $6,000 to $9,000 with a $3,000 opening bid. And there are no reserves in here. Basically, the opening bid is what would serve as the reserve, I guess. I spoke to the owner, George Rememovic, down there, and he said that everything. There's no hidden reserves. There's none of that. In other words, the starting price here is $3,000. There isn't a reserve set at $4,000 that it has to get to. That is once you place the bid, you're in the running regardless of the amount. Anyway, this is quite an interesting book. And then over to this. This is a very rare book. Now, keep in mind, some books and so forth signed by Chairman Mao have sold for huge amounts of money, $250,000, $500,000, in that range. They're very rare. Signed things by Mao are very, very rare to find. And this is one of them. It's a first edition. It is the quotations of Chairman Mao Zedong, signed and estimated they estimated at $240,000 to $300,000 with $120,000. You can hear Buck in the background; he's excited. $120,000 opening bid. It is an extremely rare signature, and it's signed directly beside his portrait on the side, which is a rather fascinating way to do it. And then there's this in the sale. Now, this is by He Kongdi. This is a very rare painting. It's the Guishan meeting being commemorated from I believe I think this was when he took over, when he was made the head of the Chinese Red Army. This painting was done in 1970, but it commemorates a time back in the 1920s when he became the head of the party. And this is a beautifully painted painting on top of being ostensibly propaganda art from 1970 by a well-known Chinese painter. The quality of the painting here is absolutely excellent. All right, and here you have Mao Zedong as a young man speaking before the Red Army shortly after the formation of the Communist Party. It's signed in the lower right, but the quality of the painting is excellent. He was a very, very accomplished artist. Extremely good painting. Beautiful quality, looks to be in very fine condition, estimated at $20,000 to $40,000 with a $10,000 starting price. But it's a very, very rare painting. If you buy art, you might want to look at this. And it's a fairly large painting, 47 by 72 inches. And this particular artist was known for, He Kongdi was known for producing large-scale paintings. He died in 2003, and he was born in 1925. And then over to this is another one. This is by Yi Shangyi. He was born in 1934. I don't know if he's still alive or not, because if he is, he's in his 90s. Maybe he is. But anyway, this is Mao Zedong inspecting a factory, which was a fairly common practice back then. They would depict Mao going to visit the workers and so forth. And it's estimated at $3,000 to $4,000. And here he is. I'm not sure what kind of it looks like a tool and die factory by the judge of that machine there. And lots of smiling faces, and there's Mao in the middle, of course. And it's an opening bid of $1,500. All right, and then hopping along, here's another one, a monumental silk panel banner of Mao from 1971. This is 8 foot 11 inches. This is a big banner. You need a place to put it, but it looks to be in outstanding condition. It's beautifully done, beautiful colors, and you'll notice that red, of course, is always the dominant color in the art from this period. Red was very, very dominant. And the red book, the red this, the red, everything's red. But anyway, this is another portrait of Mao in his standard blue, sort of his uniform that he wore all the time. Estimated at $1,000 to $2,000 with a $500 opening bid. All right, and then there's porcelain. There's quite a bit of porcelain in here. I'm not going to go through all of it. There's a lot of ceramics. This one caught my eye, obviously, because it's a very traditional shape. for a Chinese vase and so forth. And it's got the portrait of Mao at the top, and then the workers before him, and so forth. The fish at the bottom, the leaping waves. A lot of elements that we've seen here on other Chinese works of art predating Mao, obviously. And then you have this upper section here with the Buddhist beads hanging down and the Rui heads, which was a very standard decorative element during the Republic period and during the 1950s on eggshell porcelain. And you have these bats on the shoulders here and here. They have a better picture of the bats. And we've seen there's a signet, there's a thing on the bottom, there's this, and that just says Qing to Chen factory. But they have these iron red bats on the shoulders for longevity and so forth. It's an interesting piece of porcelain, and it's fairly large. It's 23 and a half inches tall. This is a pretty big piece of porcelain. So it would really stand out in a room, and it's estimated at 2 to 3,000 with $1,000 opening bid. And I think that's a fairly reasonable buy, given what it is and what it represents, and what it could do, and and plus what it might be worth in the future. And then you have these. There are a number of these Cultural Revolutionary wood carvings, and these are beautifully carved. This one, they depict different scenes. This is the Chinese Cultural Revolution relief carved wood panel. Let's see. This is one. Okay, this is one that's celebrating the foundation of the Shanghai Revolutionary Committee in 1949. All right, it was probably done after that, but it's beautifully done. It's a wonderful bit of Chinese carving. If politics aside, it's very interestingly done, very nicely detailed, with all just dozens and dozens and dozens of people cheering him on. You have the banner, you have people holding up Mao's portrait and so forth. Very, very, in their allegiance to the government. Very interesting carving, and there's several of these in here, and these are fairly good size, 18 by 12 inches. So it's a good size to hang on a wall if you're interested. And then there's this. This is a parade badge. It's 47 inches wide, and this is the kind of thing they would carry during the May Day parades or whatever parades they're doing in Tiananmen Square or in Beijing or wherever. This is something that two men would carry because it's basically a little over 3 feet in diameter. It's a fairly large plaque. Let's see how depicting Mao Zedong, 47 inches. It's made of fiberglass, metal, and paint. It's a little bit of everything, and it's very symbolic. And this one was exhibited at the Asia Society Art in China's Revolution. That was an exhibit from 2008 and 2009. This was shown at that exhibition at the Asia Society. It's estimated at $2,000 to $3,000 with a $1,000 opening bid. Interesting object, though, quite a thing. And then you have small figural groups. There's a lot of these in here, of figural groups of Mao with workers. Here they are with a bunch of school kids, all staring up at him, looking at him, and so forth. And the children with their red ties on and their nicely colored outfits and so forth. And here he is with his tie on, matching the children. Showing them solidarity, I guess. And this statue is not enormous, but it's pretty good size. It's 23 inches tall, 13 inches wide. It's not a little table shelf thing. It's a fairly big thing. It's $400 to $600 estimate with a $200 bid. It's already got a bid on it, opening bid, so it'll get there. But this is a big piece. It's rather interesting, and again, part of the history. And then you have Chinese Cultural Revolutionary flags. This is a banner, 43 by 75 inches. It's a big thing. I don't know if you'd want to hang this over your house, but it might be interesting to hang on a wall. And it's got a series of messages on here, inscribed, always loyal to Chairman Mao, always loyal to Chairman Mao Zedong's thoughts or ideas, always loyal to Chairman Mao's revolutionary line. Or always loyal to the revolution. In other words, it's estimated at $300 to $500 with a $150 opening bid, and it really makes a statement. Let's put it that way. Now, this is something I found absolutely fascinating. I really like these. These are not photographs, according to the description. These are realist paintings on ink on porcelain, and they're signed by an artist. And it's hard to believe. It's very hard to believe these are not photographs. They're so well done. I guess they're the early forerunners of photorealistic painting. as best as I can tell. And there's the name of the artist on here. Um, there's two remarkable paintings on porcelain plaques: a portrait of Sun Yat-sen on the left, who founded the Republic of China, and his wife Sung Ching Ling, and then on the right. Is who's the other one? Is it Zhao Enlai? Zhao Enlai is the other one, and they apparently signed, and they were done illustrated by Yang Huangji. I don't know who he is, but Jingdezhen Art Porcelain Factory. It was done in 1979, so it was done as a commemorative thing after Mao Zedong died, and but the quality is amazing on these. These are really quite fascinating, and they are estimated at $1,500 to $2,000 with a $750 opening bid. Very interesting, though. It's hard to believe. I just can't get over the idea that these are not photographs that have been somehow laminated. But according to this is ink painting, but incredibly fine work. If that's what it's just amazing. And then this. Now, this is a very interesting poster. This is a Cultural Revolution poster from 1967. And you'll notice there are people here from all backgrounds. You have people here from India, from Asia, Africa, and so forth. And this was a poster that was done to show the Communist Party for support of oppressed peoples around the world. This was sort of one of their attempts to get people into their circle and understand that the Communist Party was supporting their struggles as well, as it were, at the day. And a very, very interesting portrait, or poster rather. But the quality is excellent, and the facial expressions are very good. The facial expressions are good. And here you have an African gentleman carrying some sort of rifle, Kalashnikov or something. And then you have a woman here who appears to be maybe from India or somewhere in Central Asia and so forth. Very interesting. It's estimated at $400 to $800 with a $200 opening bid, and it measures 30 by 41 inches. So it's a pretty good sized poster, but colorful and very evocative, I think. And then hopping over to this, I don't know if you remember the Mao Zedong, 5 pairs of Mao Zedong and Richard Nixon. Nixon caricature ping pong paddles during the ping pong diplomacy days of the early 70s. This was toward the end of Mao's life, but he was around, and there he is, Mr. Nixon, Tricky Dick, and Mao, and they're in their original bag, which is rather interesting. There's 5 pairs of them here, and they're all ready to go. So if you have a ping pong table, if you know somebody that has a ping pong table, this would make an amazing gift, or just to have them, because it's a double history. This was when the ice was starting to crack, when China was starting to just its very earliest days of opening up to the West, which have fully occurred in the early 80s during the Reagan administration. But during the Nixon years, this was sort of the beginning. This was when Henry Kissinger made his famous trip over there to get things sort of moving, trying to get China to join the world economy and so forth. The China's economics, the future was heavily tied to this meeting, and then allowing them eventually in the next 8 years to develop commerce and trade outside of China, which we all know has been a fantastic success for them once they decided to adopt some actual capitalist business practices. They pulled a lot of money, and these are only estimated at $200 to $400 for all 5 pairs with a $100 opening bid. I would think they'd be worth more than that, because they has a dual history value, and there are 5 of them, and they're in their original bags. And to my mind, I would figure each paddle in a bag would be worth $150 at least. Just because they're so interesting for that purpose. And then the instrument, I mentioned there were some instruments in here. This was something, 2 Mao-era stringed instruments, and one of them is of course, a violin, which there are so many great Chinese violin players. Here they are. With the paper backing and so forth. But the next one, the banjo, has got Communist Revolution figures on the back, defiantly on the back of a banjo, of all things. I don't think that's really a banjo, but it looks like a banjo, which is rather interesting. And I don't know how good the violin is. It's probably just a commercially made child's violin, but it's an interesting package. So if you know somebody that can play a violin, it might be a fun thing to buy for them. It's estimated at $400 to $600 for both pieces, $200 opening bid. But again, how much it permeated the market. And this is the other thing that I liked a lot. It's a Chinese Revolutionary era a railroad plaque would have gone on a train, and it measures 15 inches in diameter. It's painted metal, and it's cast relief profile of Chairman Mao, obviously. And this is all done in metal, probably white metal or copper or something. It looks like it's probably done in copper based on this color here, but this would have been placed on a train. Absolutely, I think this visually as a sculpture and as a conversation piece, and it's 15 inches. It's a pretty interesting thing. It's a pretty interesting object. I like that a lot, actually. If I were going to bid on something in the sale, it would be this plaque. And the estimate, I think, is under the money, $200 to $400. I think it should bring more than that. Down in the future, I think this would be quite a valuable thing because it has to do with railroads. You have a lot of railroad collectors around, but it's also railroads, of course, were key and integral of bringing the economy back, bringing goods to market, and all that goes along with the symbolization of the rail system. And China has a very interesting history with the rail system. It was something they didn't want during the Qing Empire, and some of the trains that were sent to be put in China actually ended up going to Japan. And there's all kinds of stories about railroads in China. But at any rate, this is an interesting thing. And then hopping along over to this is another thing I find interesting, a very traditional stone carving on stand, very traditional looking stand. A very, very traditional looking Chinese screen stand. We've all seen them. But on it is a slate carving, again, with Mao in front of a red halo with radiating sun coming out. And this was a common composition in lots of posters you'll see with Chairman Mao's head in the middle with the red background and the light radiating out from behind him. And that's what this is. And below him is the Imperial Palace and so forth. And sunflowers down below here, and this very nice stand. And this measures about 16 and a half inches tall. It's not enormous, but I think it's a very interesting object because it incorporates old art with new art. And it's the estimate again on this I think is very low, $300 to $500 with a $150 opening bid. This should do pretty well. I think this is a very, again, like the railroad plaque. These are the kind of things that caught my eye, and I thought, boy, these are interesting objects. And in the future, I think they'll be more interesting, especially to collectors. And so forth. And then over to this, there are several of these, I think there's a couple, I think there's two of these Cultural Revolutionary carved lacquer cinnabar plates, 9.5 inches in diameter. These have come on the market before, and I will tell you that they typically sell for I think the estimate is pretty much spot on. They sell for anywhere from $350 to around $600, depending on their size. They tend to be quite well done. There's the back of it, and so forth. Interesting thing. Estimate is I think pretty much on the money. $300 to $500, $150 opening bid. But if you're a lacquer collector and you think you've got all the periods covered, and if you don't have this, you should probably get one. You should probably have it. All right. And then over to this, another type of thing, a bamboo brush pot. This is bamboo it's all hand painted and so forth. They don't say when this one was done. Judging by the looks of it, it was probably done in the 60s or so. But here it is. The paint is you can tell, is alligatored on it a bit. And that's because the bamboo, when they painted it, probably was still a little bit green and it shrank a bit. And the paint quality and so forth and age, it tends to alligator. But this is and again, here's that radiating sun again above the palace, just like we just saw on the plaque. This pattern is over here now. Very nicely done. I like this color blue they chose. Actually, I think it's a good color. Very sort of elegant, old-fashioned. Looks like something you'd find at a French house. Anyway, there's a full view of it. Interesting brush pot, and there's one of the famous with him standing with his right hand raised up in the air. And there he is on the other side, a side portrait signed on the bottom, I would assume, by the artist. The estimate is nothing, $100 to $200. It measures 9.5 inches in height, $50 opening bid. I think this is a pretty terrific thing. And again, I think this is underestimated by a good bit. Because it would appeal to people. If you're a brush pot collector, this is going to be interesting to you. If you buy Ming brush pots and Qing brush pots and Republic period brush pots, and some people buy contemporary brush pots because the carving is so good, this is something you're going to want. All right, and then again, you have this. Again, this is another one of these very. This is a commemorative poster from 1959, the 10th anniversary of the formation of the country, and on it it says 1949 to 1959, with the sort of heraldic, wreath going around it, or I think it's chaffs of wheat is what they used to use as a ground thing, and then the smoke indicating the industrial power of China, the stars and so forth, and again that radiating sun, and then in the background developing cities, and these beautiful lotus flowers and so forth. This is a very interesting poster, and there are a lot of posters in this sale, a ton of them. So check them out. $200 to $400, $100 opening bid, and it measures 30 by 21 inches. So it's a good hanging size. Hang it in a room in your house. Okay, and then we come to this, the bronze. Now this was done by Huang Gong, who was a Chinese sculptor, and this thing is fairly big. This was done in 1961. It was done a while. It was done about 12 years after the beginning of following the Communist Revolution. It's 27 inches tall, and it's patinated bronze, and it's beautifully patinated. This is very well done. Pull it along. There we go, and you can see the almost a robin's egg blue patination they used. Again, Mao with his hand reaching up toward the sky as he's depicted in so many pictures. And then down below, you have him on this plinth with staircases. It looks like a staircase coming up. I couldn't decide whether it's barbed wire or staircases, and I guess it's a staircase showing his ascent to the top of the plinth. But it's a very long plinth. And I suppose that is symbolic of in a way, this long climb up to where he was ended up being sort of symbolic of the long road it was in his life, from being a child in a poor village, very poor. He had a tough childhood. He was raised, his mother was a Buddhist who was always trying to instill Buddhism in him, and he gave up Buddhism during his teen years. But at any rate, but that long ascent upward, and there he is at the top, finally after so many years, and it's extremely symbolic, I think. And the estimate is for nothing, $400 to $600 with a $200 opening bid. To me, this looks like it should be worth $3,000 to $5,000, given what it is. I don't know how much it weighs. Do they say how much it weighs? No, you might want to call Material Culture and ask them how heavy this thing is, what it looks like from the bottom, because there's no picture of the base of it. But if it is cast bronze, this is a very interesting 20th century modern sort of thing. And it's fairly early in the communist period, so I think this has got some potential as a collectible thing. And then there's another one of these very nice carved revolutionary plaques. It almost looks like the Olympic torch, which is sort of interesting. And then you have all the workers beneath it, and the people marching for the country and so forth. Very, very interesting bit of art. Nicely done. They use two different stains on it, and it looks like it's in beautiful condition. It's all framed, and the size of this is 25 by 18, so it's a pretty good size plaque. Estimated at just $500 to $800, a $250 opening bid. Another interesting bit of history. It really is. And then the last thing of this I thought this was appropriate to put at the end. It was the elimination of the Gang of Four. And these, of course, are the gentlemen who tried to at the end of Mao's life, as he was dying, they were grabbing a lot of power and tried to take over the country. They were all found guilty. There were other people involved. A couple of people actually died before just from old age, I guess, before they even went to trial. These people went to trial. One or two of them were that were convicted were given the death penalty, but the death penalties were later commuted, and I think several of them ended up getting out of jail within 10 or 15 years of their convictions. But these are the Gang of Four, and you can see the the red line when they did this poster. It was done in the 1970s. It shows the red line of Xing them out, showing that they'd been eliminated by the new government that took over. And let's see, this was by Lushun Art Academy, 1976. So it was probably done right after. I suspect this was right after Mao died, He died earlier in the year, and these guys stepped in and they were quickly taken out and charged and later all convicted. $400 to $800 with a $200 opening bid. Anyway, that's sort of the sale. Go through the sale. It'll be on the global pages in the next couple of days. It's on Live Auctioneers, and you can do it right through Material Culture's own website. And the buyer's premium, he puts it right on there. The buyer's premium on his site is 27%. The buyer's premium on Live Auctioneers and on Valuable is 30%. So if you want to save 3%, do it through here. Do it through here. Do it through the Material Culture's own website. It's a pretty good site. It moves around pretty well. It loads quickly, and so forth. So do check out the sale. The sale is on the 8th of December. It's in a couple of weeks, so you have time. But go through and bookmark it and really think about what this stuff is. And if you've ever missed the beginning of of a collectible category, you hear people saying, "Well, I wish I'd known about lunchboxes," or "I wished I'd known about this back in the day," or the comic book craze and so forth. This is that kind of collectible, frankly. We've seen this pattern before where they come out of the market, a large collection gets broken up. They don't sell for a heck of a lot of money and everybody buys it. And suddenly, it's Pez, it's like the Pez dispensers and the DC Comics and Superman and all these interesting, from a value standpoint. I'm not talking about historical, just the value standpoint, they become very expensive. It's as simple as that. So if you have a financial curiosity about about collectibles, this is right up your alley. But if you enjoy history and you really enjoy the history of China, it's the kind of stuff you should also be aware of and understand and maybe have a little bit of appreciation for. You don't have to admire it, but you have to have an appreciation of what happened. And that's it. All right. So take a look. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. We'll be back with some auction results of the sales of Chinese things over in the UK. We'll try to get some of them done this week. I've been putting them together. And check out the video we just did on the Peabody Essex Museum from a few weeks ago. It was a fun trip. And thanks so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day. Okay. Bye-bye.